We on Fire Sports Podcast, The Spot, season number 4, episode number 48. And man, welcome in. I know it's been a few days. Hope you guys had a great week, or we're finally here at the weekend. Woo, boy, if it's your first time listening, we on Fire Sports Podcast, The Spot. We provide high-fire takes and analysis across the sporting landscape. And if you're OG of the show, I appreciate the check-in. As once again, man, we're finally here at the weekend, man. There's been a lot of things jumping off during this week across the sporting landscape. As we got the NBA playoffs in full bloom, there's some few teams that are now sent home and some teams advancing to the second round of the NBA playoffs. And we're going to dive real deep into the playoff slate and what's going on, teams that's eliminated. You know, my forecast for these teams and what they're going to do moving forward for their organizations. And also, too, just the teams moving on to the second round. Go give a little preview of just the playoffs and the second round matchups, man, that I think that's going to go down, get it cracking. But yeah, man, like I said, I hope you guys had a great week. Now we're finally at the weekend. Hope you guys can let your head down and just enjoy yourself, kick back and unwind. And speaking of kicking back and unwinding, man, breaking news came across the desk today as Greg Popovich, head coach of the San Antonio Spurs, Pop as we all know him as, and he has stepped down as head coach of the San Antonio Spurs. You know, his legacy in San Antonio as the head coach, and was at some point the GM as well, holding both duties down. That's going to be over with for Greg Popovich as he actually officially moves upstairs to more so an advisor role or consulting role within the organization. You know, still trying to kind of get the details fully on what that role would be. But man, boy, this Greg Popovich is just one of the guys that pushed the NBA forward. You know, bringing in Tim Duncan in 1997, the first overall pick in the NBA draft. You know, teaming him up with the Admiral David Robinson and Avery Johnson and that crew, the early part of the Spurs crew. Went on to win the 1999 NBA championship, you know, strike short in the year. And they knocked off the New York Knicks and, you know, the first 8th seed to get to an NBA Finals. But, you know, it was a short year. You know, a lot of people want to put an asterisk by that championship title. And I don't think so, man. They was one of the best teams in the league at that time. And obviously you got two guys, you know, David Robinson as well as Tim Duncan, basically two MVPs on the same squad, holding your front court down, man. It's just going to be a hard team to beat that year. Then we had the second installment, or what you can kind of consider the second generation of the San Antonio Spurs. You know, Manu Ginobili, also too Tony Parker, bringing them into the fold. Can't forget about my man who's making a lot of noise across the podcast world, Steven Jackson. You know, got his debut with the San Antonio Spurs. And, you know, Pop, 29 years, man. 29 years. And I'm just going to say this. We will never see an NBA coach or a coach at any sport hold the fort down for 29 years for the same organization. Those days are over. And that's why this is a special moment. First and foremost, man, just to, you know, praise just the good work that Greg Popovich has done. You know, he's made the sideline reporter interview just epic, just with his back and forth with the late, great Craig Sager. And he was a guy that didn't take no mess. You know, he was a guy that, you know, ran a tight ship, just the whole organization. You didn't see a lot of clown stuff going on within the San Antonio Spurs organization. I mean, the only controversial situation that they really had was the whole Kawhi Leonard situation a few years back. You know, him just wanting to get it evaluated by a different doctor than the team doctor, then him asking for a trade, being shipped off to the Toronto Raptors and winning an NBA championship up there. But that's the only controversial thing that we've seen from this organization, you know, in the last 30 or so years. And it was just a sad moment for me because, you know, I'm an OG, man, and I just like, you know, a guy holding it down that's been successful, 5 NBA championships with the San Antonio Spurs, spanning out over that duration of time. You know, he was a steward in the league, and he was always one to speak his mind. You know, he's, you know, came into the NBA with not a lot of fanfare. You know, there was a lot of talk, and I remember this, you know, during the, you know, mid-90s Well, he really wasn't like that first, and there was a lot of question marks when he took the helm in the 1996-1997 season. That was a year as well as David Robinson got hurt, and the Spurs lucked up, got the number 1 pick in the NBA draft. A lot of people thought that the Boston Celtics was going to get that number 1 pick, but it went to the San Antonio Spurs, and they drafted Tim Duncan and changed the whole organization. Down there in San Antonio. So, yeah, I got to pay my respect to Coach Pop. Just from Maryville, Indiana, in the Midwest, not too far from, my hometown, Chicago, man, maybe about an hour or so, from Chicago, man. I've been to Maryville, Indiana various times. And so salute, man, to Greg Popovich, man, going out on his sword. He's had a few health issues over the last couple of years, most notably earlier this season with the stroke situation that he had. So I wish him well wishes, man, and his family well wishes moving forward. We'll see what San Antonio do as far as an organization is concerned. Definitely got Wemby in the building, so they got him another superstar. Mitch Johnson, interim head coach who took over from Pop this season, he'll be taking over the fold for San Antonio. So we'll definitely see what it do for the Spurs moving forward. But let's get into these playoff games, man. And boy, we've had an epic last 2 days or so, because there's been several teams that have gotten their head put on the guillotine and their season is over with. And first, we're going to start with them Lakers. Yeah, we're going to start off with them Los Angeles Lakers. As the Minnesota Timberwolves was able to dispatch the Los Angeles Lakers 103-96 in game number 5, which ends the Los Angeles Lakers season. It's the second straight year the Lakers have went out in the first round. A year before that, the team didn't even make the playoffs. And we going to keep it 100 on We on 5 Sports Podcast, The Spot. If you're an OG of the show, man, you know my feelings about LeBron James. It's just like every single year, him getting another superstar player every single year. The Lakers are just all over the media about, what the Lakers going to do. Oh, they're going to win a championship this year. Oh, Western Conference Finals. Oh, I know you guys have heard all of that. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful to what I call genuine Laker fans. Lakers fans that go back to even the Jerry West and Elgin Baylor days, up until the Showtime Los Angeles Lakers with Magic Johnson and James Worthy, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Pat Riley. I ain't talking about those Lakers fans, because I was rocking with the Lakers real hard back then, even though I'm a diehard Bulls fan. I was rocking with Magic and, the Showtime Lakers without question. But this new era of Laker fans, what I call fair-weather fans, fans who more so a fan of LeBron James and not really the Los Angeles Lakers, this is for you. LeBron James' run as far as him winning the championship in the NBA is over. And it's been over since they won a title in the bubble. It's been over. And I've been saying this the last couple of years. And I'm not saying this really as a shot to LeBron James, because obviously he's 40 years old. Statistically, he had a good year. He's still an all-star caliber type of player. But his run at him leading a team to an NBA championship, him being the number 1 guy, them days are over. And I don't know how much proof you guys need to see that, especially two first round exits in the last 2 years. Also, the year before that, the team didn't make the playoffs at all. Obviously they got the charity situation with Luka Doncic, trading him for Anthony Davis, around the trade deadline. And there was a lot of people that had a lot of high hopes about this team. A lot of people, Western Conference Finals, well, they can make it to the NBA Finals. Boy, stop. To quote my man Big Boy from Outkast, boy, stop. This team was one of the worst defensive teams in the entire NBA. And when your best 2 players are not really defensive players like that, you're not winning an NBA championship. You can forget about it. I don't care what the name is on the back of the jersey. If those guys don't play defense, it's going to be an early exit, as it was this season. And LeBron, to his credit, he played a little bit of defense, the last maybe 2 games or so. But when you're 40 years old, you got to pick a side. Pick a side. Either you're going to be an offensive player or you're going to be a defensive player. He chose to be, a defensive player and getting stops. And we saw in the fourth quarter of those games, he basically was standing in the corner, took a couple long jumpers, and that was it. I mean, if you look at between game 3, game 4, and game 5, Luka Doncic and LeBron James did not score double figures in 3 games in the fourth quarter. And This is a team, the Los Angeles Lakers, they obviously top heavy. The Lakers are always top heavy. And what they need to understand as an organization is that you got to build the team out. And you can go big game hunting with the big names and all of that, but at some point, you got to build the rest of the roster out. This team was just inept defensively, especially, in the front court. They tried to make the trade for Mark Williams at the trade deadline or towards the trade deadline with the Charlotte Hornets, but he failed the physical, and that trade went through. Now, Jeanie Buss and Rob Pelinka, they got to make some moves during this summer, and they just extended Rob Pelinka, so he'll be there for a minute. But for the Los Angeles Lakers, man, this should be evidence enough to say at this point, it's time really to rebuild this team on the fly. LeBron James, if you expected him to be the number one guy to help lead you to an NBA championship, you're dead wrong in that. And so we'll see what the Los Angeles Lakers do moving forward, man, as they move into the summer with another early exit in the NBA playoffs. And shout out to Minnesota Timberwolves. This is a young team that they keep knocking folks out. Last year they went on an epic run to the Western Conference Finals. It was a great run by them. Anthony Edwards, he got a lot of bodies now. From Kevin Durant last year. Now to Luka Doncic as well as LeBron James. So this younger than the last 3 years have knocked out some of the most notable names in the sport. And so we'll see, how far Minnesota go moving forward. And I'll kind of, get into that as, we kind of take a peek at, these games coming up as far as the second round is concerned. But definitely, man, the Los Angeles Lakers, man, another epic flame out in the NBA playoffs. And coming up, I'm going to get into them Knicks and them Pistons. Also, too, looks like we got a Game 7 out here. Yeah, the Denver Nuggets as well as the Los Angeles Clippers. We're going to get into that series as well. As I mentioned also, too, we're going to preview the game tonight between the Houston Rockets and the Golden State Warriors. And also take a peek into the matchups within the second round, man, that's already kind of developed so far. So first and foremost, man, I appreciate all the love and the feedback. I appreciate your ear. We on Fire Sports Podcast. The spot. Welcome back. And before I get into the NBA, man, and take a look at these games coming up tonight and just what jumped off between the Knicks and the Pistons, also too the Clippers and the Nuggets, gonna get into a little bit of Major League Baseball out here. As Major League Baseball, we've been so far a month into the MLB season, and I just love just baseball when it comes back. It seems like the grass is just greener. Just the fans going out to the ballpark, man, getting those good eats, and just a lot of people having high hopes for their team. Independent races, just jumping off at the beginning of the season before a lot of teams, fall back and, hope is all lost out there. First, I'm going to start off with this. Not sure if you guys have seen, man, and I want to send, definitely prayers out to the gentleman that actually fell the other day, man. Was watching my Cubs take on the Pittsburgh Pirates at PNC Stadium up in Pittsburgh. There was a situation during the game, man, where a fan fell out of his seat and fell onto the field from pretty high up from the stands. Looks like that fan is still in critical condition in the hospital. And so first and foremost, man, prayers go out, say to that gentleman as well as his family. I mean, just looking at the video of it, it was a scary situation, just to say the least. I just so happened to be, checking out my Cubs taking on the Pirates, man, when all this jumped off. And so definitely want to send, my prayers out, to that party as well as, their family, just in regards. Hopefully they can make a recovery just in that. But my look across Major League Baseball, which to me, like the first month of the season, is really kind of the litmus test. I mean, it's 162 of these, man. So it's a long marathon race in Major League Baseball. But, just my early thoughts, just across, we take a look at the American League, man. The Yankees, they lead in the AL East, which I think is going to be tight all season long. Obviously, you got the Boston Red Sox and the Toronto Blue Jays, which, the Jays, they only 3 games back of the Yankees. And I don't think the New York Yankees have kind of hit their stride just yet. So I think that division may be still a tight race as we move towards mid part of the summer, as well as the finish line in regards to that. Also, to the Tigers, man. Detroit Tigers playing good baseball right now as well. They're leading the AL Central currently right now. A game and a half up on the Cleveland Guardians. That's a, division that, close to my heart as well. I'm from Chicago, so, my Chicago White Sox play in that division. White Sox, man, it's just going to be a long, long road, man, back to relevancy for the Chicago White Sox. At least I can say this, is that the White Sox don't have, say, the worst record in Major League Baseball. Currently, right now, that belongs to the Colorado Rockies. Their team, just in the same vein as my White Sox. Not sure, man, how much money, and I'm hearing word on the street out there in Colorado is that they're really not spending any money, and the money that they did spend on guys is that it's just not working out. And, it's just, for me, it's a situation where some of these teams, they want to, get on Moneyball mode. And sometimes it's a long perch forward, definitely when you want to take that avenue. But we'll see. Also, too, you got the New York Mets. Got the Mets right now. Currently, I think statistically, the Mets got the best record in Major League Baseball. It was a big-time deal, man, with Juan Soto going up there with the Mets getting that big bag of money from the owner Cohen. So we'll see if the Mets are still, able to keep this momentum. They kind of slipped a little bit, losing a couple games, man, the last couple of games, man. But they looking good so far. We'll see if they can keep it up. Can't forget also, too, about my Chicago Cubs, man. My Cubbies out there, man. And, I was a little on one, man. We lost, a couple games, to the Pirates. Just in that series, we was able to, pick up that loose change in the last game. But the Cubs, good bats. We got one of the best offenses in Major League Baseball, man. But I'm still iffy about that bullpen. We got to see what it do, man, with the bullpen, man, with my Chicago Cubs, man. So we'll see, what it do moving forward. But one thing I will say, I think the best division in Major League Baseball right now is the NL West. Because you got the Dodgers obviously sitting in first place, the Padres right on their heels. Both these teams started off the season hotter than a firecracker. They both then kind of tailed off just a little bit. And the San Francisco Giants, they right there, 2.5, basically 3 games back. And so I think that right now this is the best division in Major League Baseball. But we'll see, man, if they can keep up the pace just in regards. And so I can't wait, man, as we mosey on through the summer. Get a chance, man, to go out to a couple ball games, hit a couple ballparks as well up in my native Chicago land. Also, too, man, down here in the Atlanta area. Shout out to the Atlanta Braves. It's a team as well that kind of started off slow a little bit, but they picking it up a little bit. So we'll definitely see what it do moving forward in regards to that. And coming up, we going to get back into the NBA playoff slate, as we got some teams now advancing to the second round of the NBA playoffs. Also, we got some teams, going home. As I mentioned, one of those teams a little bit earlier was the Los Angeles Lakers. I'm going to get into, a couple teams that season is over with. And also, too, just going to preview the one game tonight between the Golden State Warriors as well as the Houston Rockets. See if the Warriors is able to go ahead and close out that series. We'll see what it do. First and foremost, I appreciate all the love and the feedback. I appreciate you. Yeah, we on Fire Sports Podcast spot. Yeah, we're gonna get back into the NBA as we got us a Game 7 that'll be played on Saturday between the Denver Nuggets and the Los Angeles Clippers. As we saw yesterday, man, the Los Angeles Clippers going back to L.A., they was able to knock off the Denver Nuggets 111-105. And I had some questions going into that game. And to me, the biggest question going into that game was, which James Harden was going to show up? The last couple games going into last night, man, James Harden had been traditional James Harden. Start off a series looking hot. Once we get into kind of money time, the lights get kind of dim for James Harden. But going into that game, I knew that James Harden had to play like an NBA All-Star play, getting into his bag and just being that guy to knock off the Denver Nuggets. The Denver Nuggets, man, they've been playing with a whole bunch of momentum ever since, they got that, alley-oop or tip, however you want to call it, man, by Aaron Gordon, man, for games. First time we've had a dunk in the NBA playoff game, man, a walk-off dunk as they would call it. And I thought that the Denver Nuggets, especially too, man, with Jamal Murray coming off that 40-piece, that he had, in game number 5, is that, I thought that the Nuggets might be on one, man, and might be able to close out the Los Angeles Clippers out there in L.A. But James Harden got in his bag, had 28 points, 6 rebounds, and 8 assists. The Denver Nuggets, to me, Jokic, probably one of his worst playoff games I've seen, and the bar's kind of high for Jokic, meaning that for a guy to have 25.7 boards and 8 assists, there's a lot of NBA players, man, to get a left leg to have a stat line like that in a playoff game. But for Jokic, it's not one of his better games, and I thought that, the Denver Nuggets paid for it. I love the energy that the Clippers had, even though, the Nuggets, they tried to, fight back towards the end of this game, and I thought it was going to be another epic finish. But the Clippers was able to hold this team off. And I think part of that, man, is just the great coaching by Tyronn Lue. He's done a great job out there in Los Angeles for the Clippers. Norman Powell, he was playing at a very energetic pace. And he's really the third man just in the wheel for the Los Angeles Clippers, because we obviously know, what Kawhi Leonard brings to the table. He's playing some of his best ball we've seen in the last couple of years from Kawhi Leonard. So I'm not really tripping on him. I expect him to show up in that epic game number 7 that'll be played on Saturday. But guys like, Bogdanovic, Norman Powell, Zubac, my man Chris Dunn, those are the guys that if they're trying to get out of this series with Denver, those have to be the guys that get it done when it's money time. And they was able to get that pulled off once again. They was able to knock off the Nuggets 111-105. Game number 7 to be played on Saturdays, the only game of that Saturday slate. As man, the surprising part about it is that we've only had so far, because the Houston Rockets as well as the Golden State Warriors, that series can go 7. But I'm surprised we didn't see a couple other potential 7-game series. So I can't wait for that whole clip on Saturday. And then let's talk about these New York Knicks. Let's talk about these New York Knicks as the Knicks knocked off the Detroit Pistons 116-113. And boy, was this a good game, man, especially in the fourth quarter. It just seemed like in this series, man, the fourth quarter has been just epic. And the first thing that I'm thinking about, man, is just Jalen Brunson is that dude, man. Jalen Brunson is that guy. I mean, I had an opportunity to watch Jalen Brunson play in high school. Went to high school in the Chicagoland area. So I've been watching Jalen Brunson, man, since he was a junior in high school, putting in work. And so I knew that, one day he was going to be an NBA player eventually. But I didn't know he was going to be that guy. And it's something I had to think about, last night. When I seen them just do that epic, just put on the brakes move, hit the big time 3-piece. I mean, the man won NBA Clutch Player of the Year for what it's worth. But to see that move, I said, oh, man, this guy's just all the way in his bag, man. He's a craft master galore. But it got me to raise the question. And we talk about New York Knicks and just all the great players that the Knicks have had, probably over the last, say, 30 to 40 years. Bernard Kings back in the day, Patrick Ewing, just Allen Houston, made some big-time contributions for the New York Knicks. Can't forget about Carmelo Anthony. And I said, if Brunson, and I'm not saying this may happen because they got their hands full next matchup with the Boston Celtics, and I'll get into that in a second. But if the Knicks go on another deep playoff run, Brunson might be the best Knicks since Patrick Ewing. Real talk. A lot of people in New York already feel that way. And there's no shade on the more recent Hall of Famer Carmelo Anthony. There's no shade at Melo at all. It's just Jalen Brunson, man, just on one right now. Like I said, another 40-piece. The Detroit Pistons, man, they had this game in the bag. And there was 2 games this series that was straight in the hands of the Detroit Pistons, and they just fumbled it out of their hands. But that comes with youth. And J.B. Bickerstaff, he's done an outstanding job with the Detroit Pistons. Detroit stand up. I thought, just the general management upstairs for Detroit, they did a good job of bringing in some of the veterans to be able to move these young players along, especially, Jalen Duren and, Cade Cunningham. They was able to put, Tobias Harris along with these guys and, Tim Hardaway Jr.'s of the world, Dennis Schroeder's of the world. And so, and I like what I see from Detroit. I think it'll be brighter days for the Detroit Pistons. I just think that just their fan base as a whole and just the city of Detroit, they've been through a whole lot, man, probably over the last, say, 10 years or so. And so it's great just to see the fan base and just the people just being kind of on one, man. But unfortunately, the Knicks, they're a veteran team now. And they move on, as I mentioned, to the second round, man. They got their hands full, though. I'm not sure how long they can celebrate, man. They got their hands full taking on the Boston Celtics, in the second round. But we'll see what it do, man. You never know. You never know out here. Boston Celtics are obviously defending NBA champions. So I can't wait. I can't wait for that series, man, to jump off. And then let's get into tonight. Can't forget about tonight, man. We got the Houston Rockets taking on the Golden State Warriors. As this game be played out there at the Chase Center in San Francisco. As the Warriors are up 3-2 in this series. And the Warriors, man, they had an opportunity to close the Houston Rockets out, man, in Game 5. And I don't think the Golden State Warriors got off the bus down there in Houston. I mean, that game was over with before really it started. I'm checking the game out, and I'm on the East Coast, people. And a lot of my, fans and, people who check in with me, man, they on the East Coast also, too. I got love for the West Coast all day. But these games come on mighty late, man, if you're on the East Coast. And, I'm just trying to, do my prep work, man, watch this series, man. But this thing got ugly early, man. I said, man, I'm going to have to catch these highlights, man, because this just got way out of hand. But the Warriors being up 3-1 going into that game, they could afford to drop a game. But we'll see what it do tonight, man, because the Rockets, they ain't dead yet. Dylan Brooks still being that villain. You got Jalen Green. He's a young guy that, for me, he's got to have one of those epic games, man. Because he's been up and down like the Dow Jones. He's been inconsistent over the last couple of games, and he's got to bring it. Sengun been putting in work the whole series. It's just a matchup nightmare with him and Draymond Green or whatever or whoever the Golden State Warriors want to put on Sengun. He's been eating and taking lunch money the whole series pretty much. Outside of that one game where Draymond Green did play some good defense in the fourth quarter of that game. I believe that was game number 3, if I'm not mistaken. But he's been taking their lunch money. And so now Jimmy Butler, a little bit more healthier. I expect the Golden State Warriors, man, to come out just with a little bit more energy in this game. It's going to be on one, especially out there in San Francisco, man. I know my man E40, E4O going to be in the building, and all just the great fan base that the Golden State Warriors have out there. So it's definitely going to be a big-time home court advantage situation. And so for me, I think the Warriors will close out the Houston Rockets tonight. It's a series that going into this series, man, I had the Golden State Warriors winning this series in 7 games. But I just think that, to me, just the experience of the Golden State Warriors and them having Game 6 at the crib, I think they'll be able to go ahead and shut the door, man, on the Houston Rockets in this ball game, man, and move on to the second round. Houston, they got an opportunity. They definitely got a puncher's chance. I mean, this is a very talented team. The future is bright for the Houston Rockets. Ime Udoka is one of the most special coaches across the National Basketball Association. So I'm not counting them out. I just think that the experience from the Golden State Warriors will show itself, man, out there in Frisco. And in closing, before we close up shop, man, on this Friday evening, man, as we move forward into the weekend, I ain't gonna hold you. We got the Nuggets and the Clippers coming up in game number 7 tomorrow, man. That game actually will be played out in Denver. We'll see if the Denver fans come out, man. And I just love game 7 because it's do or die. You're going to get the best of both teams, best version of both teams. And so, that's going to be an epic clip that will go down. And Sunday, we got the Cleveland Cavaliers taking on the Indiana Pacers. They're going to jump off on Sunday as well. Cleveland, man, just handling their business. A lot of people believe that it's just going to be Cleveland and Boston that going to meet up in the Eastern Conference Final. Cleveland, ironically, got home court advantage in the Eastern playoffs. The Pacers, they fresh off knocking off their nemesis, the Milwaukee Bucks. So, they're not going to be, a tomato can, man. They going to try to bring a little oomph. I just think that the Cleveland Cavaliers right now, they're clicking on all cylinders. The job that Kenny Atkinson has done up there in Cleveland, I mean, for this team, man, to win 64 games, they really own one, and they definitely got a real shot at making a very deep playoff run, potentially even getting themselves to the NBA Finals. So we'll definitely see what it do on that front. So, man, I ain't gonna hold you, man. Hope you guys have a great weekend. I'm gonna be sitting back, relaxing, enjoying what's going on in the sporting landscape. Now, I'll be right back at you guys coming up at the top of the week. But first and foremost, man, I appreciate all the love and the feedback. I appreciate you. Yeah. We on Fire Sports Podcast. The spot.